Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk about all the new items that Riot has added in Season 14. I'm going to go through them class by class, so talk about all the mage items, then assassin items, etc. And I will timestamp every item individually on the description below, so make sure to check that out and just skim through the video if you want. Again, I'm mainly going to talk about the new items that Riot added. I might talk about some of the reworked ones if they've been changed significantly, but for the most part, we'll stick to the new ones. So first off will be our AP items. So AP got 4 new completed items, which are Malignance, Cryptbloom, Stormsurge, and Luden. So we'll start off with Malignance. So Malignance, 2800 gold, which is pretty nice, quite cheap. Gives 80 AP, 600 mana, some ability haste. Importantly, it's giving ultimate haste. This is the big one, so it's going to be quite useful on champs that obviously really value their ultimate. So Ahri being one of those. Then the passive on this is Hate Fog. So damaging a champ with your ultimate burns the ground beneath them. It deals damage and reduces their MR by 8. So what you'll see is that, you know, if I ult here, it creates this little pool underneath them that continues to burn. Now, there is a small cooldown to this. I believe originally it was 6 seconds. I believe it's actually been changed to 1 second, so you can spawn more than one. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I'll have to check again. But basically, that would make it quite good on champions like Swain, where you can keep reapplying it. Suppose I can't really check it that easily on Ahri. I can just keep creating the pool. But yeah, so it's meant to be good for those sorts of champs. I feel like this item is not actually as good as people think. I think that it's... Well, you see here that the radius is increased based on the damage done. So what that means is that like singular hits are meant to create, you know, a bigger pool, so it's harder to get out of. The problem is if you have multi-small hits, you know, like ticking damage or something like Ariel, is that unless you have a way to keep them in the circle, they can get out of it kind of quick. So I'm not too sure. The item is cheap enough that it might still just be good enough that if you're a champion that really values ultimate, that you build it anyway. But I think it's probably best on... You know, again, champions that have like some sort of slow in the kit, or maybe even something like Ori, where it's like you're going to ult, it's a singular amount of big damage, you know, creates a big AoE, and then you can slow them with your W on the way out. So that's the sort of champs I think it would be good on. Probably an underrated item, but also overrated on a lot of champs too. Now, our next item is Cryptbloom. So this is a Void Staff competitor, but it's actually a lot better than Void Staff in terms of flexibility. So the nice thing about Cryptbloom, at least compared to Void, is although it's giving less stats, and you can't buy them along side by side, it gives 10 less AP, 10% less Magic Pen, which is actually quite a lot. You get Ability Haste, which means it's a much better second item than Void Staff is. Like, Void Staff second's not great, but Cryptbloom second is actually pretty good. So you can go something like, you know, I don't know, Luden's Cryptbloom Rabadon's, like that's a fine build. And then... The passive on this is whenever you get to take down an enemy champ within 3 seconds of damaging them, create healing nova on their location that heals allies for 90 seconds. So it's kind of like a redemption. It's fairly large and it scales with AP, 50% of AP, which is actually really big. There's a good chance that this AoE heals your team for about like 1k healing in a team fight, which is really, really nice. And again, because it's so strong, you know, as a second item, you know, just with more flexibility, it still scales really well too, because it's got like that big AP scaling on it. So I think Cryptbloom, probably better than Void Staff a lot of the time at the moment, especially if you're buying it second. Perhaps against like full, you know, magic resist teams, that Void Staff is actually better, but I think Cryptbloom is really, really good. And yeah, it's going to be like a go-to probably for a lot of champs. You know, really, like pretty much every AP champ needs a Void or a Cryptbloom in their build, and at the moment I think Cryptbloom might be a bit better. But other items here, so Luden's and Stormsurge. I'll start with Luden's because that's the first item that competes with Malignance, as well as Ceres. So Luden's, you gain a shot charge every 3 seconds up to 6 maximum, and you can see those charges on the item here. Damaging abilities consume all the charges to deal... It's 40 damage flat, plus 8% of your AP, and then 1 additional nearby target per charge. So it does cleaving damage, you know, again, per charge. So you can hit a lot of AoE. But honestly, it's not that good. Like, I think the old Luden Splash was better. That being said, if there are insufficient targets in range, for each remaining shot, you repeat the damage on the primary target, dealing 35% damage. So what that means is if a target is isolated, you're going to deal a lot more damage to them. So if I do something like here, you can see the Luden's Shok goes off for a bunch of, you know, repeated damage there. But if you have, like, you know, a bunch of charges and then, well, let's say 2, and we're dashing between these 2, it's going to deal the damage to both of them. So honestly, I think this item is... It is strong, but... Honestly, I'm actually not sure if it's OP. Like, I think Luden's with Stormsurge is quite OP, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Like, the combo is quite strong. But I'm not sure if Luden's on its own is actually that great. And I think that a lot of... While a lot of burst mages would probably go for this, I think, you know, a lot of just, like, regular control mages are probably just going Ceres for this item now. So, it's probably really good on... I think, like, if Ahri doesn't end up going Malignance, she'll probably build Luden's. If LeBlanc goes back to the AP build instead of AD, like she is right now, Luden's would probably be quite good on her as well. So it's kind of like, yeah, AP burst mages can consider Luden's, you know, Syndra as well, can be pretty good. And our last item here is Stormsurge. So this item is, I think, really overtuned at the moment. So it's got some nice stats on it. It's got movement speed. And then the passive, which is on a 30-second cooldown, deals 35... If you deal 35% of a champ's maximum health within 2.5 seconds, basically it gives you some movement speed, kind of like Phase Rush does. And then after 2 seconds, it strikes the target, which deals basically AoE damage, which also scales with AP, 30%, quite a bit. So if you see here, if I don't know, come in... Yeah, I don't actually have much damage, but we should be able to do enough. Yeah, applies the squall, and then you see this gets called down and zaps him. So pretty nice. Also gives you a little bit of gold, which is, yeah, a little bit of a cherry on top. I think that this is really good on basically every mid at the moment. Like, it feels like it's very strong. I've seen Akali's building it. I've seen plenty of mages building it second when they don't want something like a Liandry's or a Cryptbloom or something. So Stormsurge kind of feels like the go-to second item right now. For most mages, and something you should definitely be considering. Next, we'll move on to the fighter and diver items. So the first one here is experimental Hexplate. I haven't seen many people build this item yet. I have seen it built on Aurelia though. So what this does, 55 AD, 20% attack speed, 300 health, and then after casting your ultimate, you gain attack speed and movement speed for 8 seconds. So we just level up here. I can show you guys it's a nice little steroid to a bunch of your stats. So you can see down here, you know, obviously that's really nice if you're a champ that's very ult-reliant and about to take a skirmish. I think that this might actually end up being more of an AD carry item, you know, for the ones that are very ult-reliant. Like, I could see this being like a tank vein top item or something like that. But at the moment, I have not seen a whole lot of this item, but Aurelia seems to be, you know, one of the primary users of it. A top lane item, though, that is very, you know, very common right now is Sundered Sky, and I've seen this being built first item or second item, depending on the champ. Champs like Camille, Fiora, Renekton, I've seen a lot of them, so it's pretty simple, and I'm sure you guys will be familiar with it, but 55 AD, 300 HP, 15 ability haste. The first basic attack crits for 150% and heals for missing health, which is scaling with base AD. So it's pretty nice, and then excess healing is granted as temp bonus health, which means it's really good for trading as well. I haven't seen much of, you know, obviously I'm a mid laner and I haven't seen this built much mid lane, but from what I've seen in my games, it's been built in top lane like all the time. So definitely an item you want to keep an eye on. And again, it can be like first or second item, depending on what sort of champ you're playing. I think rushing it as a first item though is pretty good. It does build out of some like fairly nice components. So yeah, another item that you guys will really like. The next one we'll talk about, Wit's End. It hasn't actually, it's not a new item, obviously, but it has been reworked in a big way. So Wit's End is definitely much more of a fighter item than it was before. It doesn't have AD on it anymore, so you're unlikely to pick it up on AD carries. But the fact that it has 20% tenacity means, again, for champs like Aurelia, Wit's End should be really good now, especially if you don't have tenacity in your runes. It's going to make playing team fights out a lot easier, and still got all the attack speed on it, still got the magic damage on hits on it, so yeah. It's an item that I think was reworked enough to talk about in this video, but I don't know. Let me guys know if you've seen many people building this, because again, I haven't actually seen a whole lot of Wit's End yet, but I feel like an item with tenacity on it that's not boots actually has a lot of potential. Moving on now to our tank items, we have 4 new completed items, which are Kaenic Rookern, Hollow Radiance, Unending Despair, and Trailblazer. So we'll start with Trailblazer. I think this is mainly for support tanks. I think champs like Blitzcrank, Nautilus, and stuff will probably be building this. What it does is 250 health, 40 armor, movement speed, and then while moving, you gain bonus movement speed. At max speed, you create a trail that speeds up allies behind you, and then your next attack discharges the bonus movement speed and slows the target. So I think it's really good for those kind of like engaged tank supports. I've seen Blitzcranks building it. I've seen, again, Nautilus, Leona. It's kind of, I think, that first item replacement, although you can build it later, but I've seen some people building this over Locket. And it's pretty cheap. In fact, it's cheap enough that you can maybe consider it in other roles as well. I haven't seen it built by a top or a mid laner yet, but I think it definitely jungle tanks could think about this at some point. Obviously, it's got low stats on it, like 250 health is not amazing, but you know, that movement speed allowing for the engage, I think especially if you're ahead, can really allow you just to force fights over and over. So it's definitely something to think about and look at. The next few tank items, though, are pretty ridiculous. So we'll talk about Hollow Radiance. So this one gives a bunch of health, bunch of MR, some health regen, and then taking or dealing damage causes you to deal magic damage, which scales with your bonus HP per second to nearby enemies, increased by 20%, 25% against minions. So basically, it's kind of like having a Sunfire AoE effect. And then, yeah, taking or dealing damage refreshes the duration, so it keeps on going. And then also Desolate, killing an enemy deals extra magic damage in an area around them. So I think it's just meant to be kind of to make like tanks viable in mid lane, and it feels like it also shuts down like AP carries top quite a lot. This item feels very strong. I think, you know, it's going to be difficult, I think, for especially champs without, or especially champs with mana problems or with wave clear problems to keep up with something like this. Like, I can imagine you playing something like Galio versus Akali, and Akali just being completely unable to keep up with this sort of thing. And combine that with the other really broken MR item, which is Kaenic Rookern. So I'll talk about this one. 400 health, 80 MR, which is a lot on its own. Like, it's a very statted item. And then Mage Bane. After not taking magic damage for 12 seconds, you gain a magic shield, which also scales with your health. So these two items, I feel like if you are ever playing a tank against an AP heavy team, the combo of these two items, first and second, is going to be insanely hard to deal with. I'm pretty surprised, to be honest, that this item here made it into the game the way it is, because it feels absolutely broken. Obviously, you can build other items and then build into these items later, and I think there is even potential for some champs to kind of just like fit it in randomly. You know, I could see a champ like Rise, for example, just buying this later on instead of something like a Banshees, if he really just wants like the stats. I even considered it on a champ like Cassier. I played one game and I almost bought this item, so this feels pretty good, and I think it is really, really good if you're ever playing a tank against AP heavy teams or an AP laner. Even just one of these items goes a long way, especially Hollow Radiance Rush. But if you're against an AP heavy team, like if you're against double or triple AP topside and you buy these two, you're going to be completely unkillable. So be very aware of that combination. And then our last item here is Unending Despair. So this is another tank item that you can rush, except this time it's against AD champions. And every 7 seconds while in combat, you deal magic damage which scales with HP and level. Two nearby enemy champions healing for 250% of the damage dealt. So this feels like an item that when you get ahead is going to be extremely frustrating to deal with, because you're going to be healing for a ton. And if people don't have healing cut, then, well, you're just going to keep healing on top of, you know, if you're a tank, health already is a very valuable stat, right? Like every like 100 healing you get, for example, goes further because you have a lot of MR and armor to back it up. So I haven't actually seen a whole lot of tanks yet in my games. Again, I've only played those 13 games, only 13 games that I played yesterday. But I think tanks are honestly probably a lot better than people give them credit for at the moment. I feel like the tank items are very, very strong, and I actually think there's a lot of potential for tanks in mid at the moment. And I'll definitely be trying some on stream today. But yeah, that's the overview for the 4 new tank items. Lethality users got some new items as well, and our first one here is Opportunity. So this feels like a very, very good first item for plenty of the, you know, Lethality or Assassin roster at the moment. It gives AD, Lethality, and Movement Speed, which are all stats that are very valuable. And then it gives even more Lethality after you've been out of combat with champs for 8 seconds. And then on top of that, you also get kind of like a phase rush passive. Like if a champion dies within 3 seconds of damaging them, you get a little bit of decaying movement speed, which can be really good for getting out of team fights or, you know, getting out of a dive after you successfully pulled it off. So this has been an item that I really like, and also it's only 2,700 gold, which is super, super important. Now, another item that kind of competes with this is Hydra. So the thing with Hydra is, I was looking at this and thinking like, okay, this item is just amazing. You know, obviously you get the old Hydra active of like the AoE damage. You also get 18 lethality, ability haste, attack damage. But the biggest problem with this is that it costs 3,400 gold. So this is still being built on some champs. You know, if you're a champ that really needs wave clear, something like I've seen it built on Town, I've seen it built on the Fury, I've even seen it built on Kiana. So champs like that can build it. And actually they are good users of it. Really just the biggest downside is that it's so expensive. So be a bit careful of that. I think on some champs that you'd think would be great Hydra users are probably thinking at least about other items first, just because, you know, it's going to take a lot of money. At the same time, if you can use this to kind of catapult your farming ahead, I think that's like really, really strong. Another item that is extremely broken at the moment is Voltaic Cyclosword. I think this might be the best lethality item in the game at the moment, at least for the champs that can use it. So 55 AD, 18 lethality, 15 ability haste, but you get this energized attack, which deals bonus damage and slows enemies, so it allows you to, you know, hit the rest of your combo, and dashes and stealth stack this quicker. So this is actually being built a lot on LeBlanc, but it's being built on plenty of assassins as well. And I think if you are a champion that abuses this well, like if you do have dashes or stealth in your kit, I think this is a very, very strong item. It is 2,900 gold, I think it is. Yeah, 2,900. So it is like a tiny bit more expensive than the other ones, but I think it's one of the items that should be abused the most at the moment. And I think the slow, you know, even though it's like not actually raw damage, like it has damage on it, which is only 100, but the slow just allowing you to hit the rest of your combo is absolutely absurd. There are a lot of assassins that are kind of balanced around their combo having counterplay, and just having the slow a lot of the time means that it does not. The last new item that lethality users have is Hubris, and this gives similar stats to the other ones, you know, just the same old. But when you kill an enemy champion, you're granted a statue of yourself, and then when a champion that you've damaged within the last 3 seconds dies, you gain extra AD, and it increases and scales more based on, you know, basically how many champs you've killed. So This feels like an item that if you're going to buy, you probably buy it early in a game that you know you can snowball. I haven't seen this bought a whole lot, and I'm not sure if that's because this item is actually weak. I think it's more that the other lethality items feel like they're a bit stronger, and this like takes a while to scale. There are also not many assassins that can kind of delay their spike for longer, and if they are, they're probably buying a Hydra so that they can actually farm and continue getting gold, right? So Hubris feels like maybe if you're really snowballed early, or you just know that they have a bunch of squishies, you're going to get a bunch of kills, because it does feel like pretty ridiculous later on when this is giving you a ton of extra AD, but again, it takes a while, so I find this item kind of overrated at the moment, or at least not bought very often, but it has some potential, I think. And finally, even though it wasn't reworked, I wanted to really quickly mention Cyrilda's because it's changed quite a lot. So Cyrilda's now has lethality on it, but it has less armor pen. And also the damaging abilities slow enemies under 50%, so rather than just slowing them all the time. This is a pretty big difference, mainly for assassins, because before you could use Cyrilda's to guarantee your combos, right? You could do something like, you know, you hit a slow with one ability and then you guarantee the rest of your combo. Or it could be, you know, good for champs like Jace that are just like poking from range and just really slowing the enemy team the whole time. Now that it's below 50%, I feel like if you're really looking for a slow in your kit, you're much better off going for the Voltaic Cyclosword. That being said, this is still a good-ish option, right? Like, it still has decent enough stats on it. Worth noting as well is that it does lock you out of buying Cleaver, so there are some champs who would prefer Cleaver for the HP. So you have to be a bit more careful about buying this now, but there's still plenty of champs that use it, right? I've seen Zed's build it, I've seen Kiana's build it, and I think it's probably still an item that you should be thinking about a lot of the time, but just bear in mind that the situations are a bit different after the rework. The ADC's only got one new completed item, which is Terminus. It gives attack damage, attack speed, and then it's got some pretty interesting passives on it. So the first one, obviously, attacks applied 30 magic damage on hit, pretty basic. And then the second one, you alternate between light and dark on hits each attack. So light attacks make you tankier, giving you armor and MR. And that scales with level as well, just a little bit. And then the dark attacks grant armor and magic pen up to 30% for 5 seconds. So this feels like an item that's built for a champion like Kog'Maw. There's potentially other uses, you know, again, Vayne, the one I have here, could be useful, but obviously it just synergizes with the other on-hit builds because, you know, the more on-hit and the more attack speed you have, the quicker you're going to get these fully stacked up, which is going to feel really good. I think it's probably not an item you build first still. I mean, again, I haven't seen a whole lot of this item, but I have a feeling you probably want to buy other things before you're going for this. I feel like, you know, first item, it just probably doesn't offer enough, but we'll kind of have to see. That being said, you know, for the rest of ADC items, like even though the items haven't changed, there's a lot of items from other classes that are being built. So again, I've seen a couple experimental hexplates on a few champions just that are, you know, all reliant and actually use the rest of the stats and attack speed. Also, you know, like I was talking about in the lethality section, Voltaic Cyclosword is good on a lot of AD carries with dashes. So I've seen this on Akshan, I've seen it on Lucian. I haven't seen it on Vayne, but I imagine it's pretty good on Vayne. So this is something you should be thinking about. It's kind of like a Stormrazor equivalent, except it's giving you lethality instead of crit, and it feels pretty strong. So it's definitely something worth thinking about. And yeah, the only other real big change is obviously like don't build Wit's End. It doesn't have AD on it. Although I guess like for the on-hit users, just the attack speed can be nice. I think AD carry as a role though, at least to my understanding, is the role that receives probably the least changes. But yeah, I mean, if you guys have anything else that you think is really different about AD carry, just let me know. Because yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot about it. The support items have changed a fair amount, so the first one being that there is only one support item to start with, and it pretty much works the same as before, except it's a combination of both Relic Shield and Spell Thieves, which is kind of nice. It allows you more options for getting gold, which feels really good. Once you complete this item, it's kind of like before, so once you get 500 gold, it will upgrade, and that will give you this one here, which, you know, just like the old warding item, allows you to place wards, and obviously this refills when you return to base. Now, after this, you have to get, I think it's 1,000 gold. Yeah, so you have to get another 1,000 gold. But once you get this fully stacked, you have an option to buy one of 5 different support items. So there's a lot of different ones, and I'll go through them. First one, Celestial Opposition. So this, basically, you become blessed, you reduce incoming champion damage, lingers for 2 seconds, kind of like Aftershock in a way. When the shield breaks, unleash a shockwave that slows nearby enemies. So this is probably going to be bought on tankier supports against stuff like Nautilus or Leona that really need to survive that initial engage. You're likely to see them upgrade to this. Next one here is Dreammaker. So this is really your Ardent support one. Gain a blue dream bubble and a purple dream bubble. Healing or shielding an ally gives them both bubbles, empowers them for 3 seconds, reducing incoming damage and granting bonus magic damage on hits. So pretty much just the bread and butter of Ardent supports. It's, you know, any Lulu, Nami, Soraka, I can imagine building this, and I think it's going to be really good. I think this item actually might be really overtuned. I have seen it a few times and it felt very, very impactful, so definitely an item to look out for. Next one, Zaz'Zak's, I don't know why they named that. Zaz'Zak's Realmspike. So this, I think, is the AP support option. Dealing ability damage to a champion causes an explosion at their target location in AoE and does a little bit of max health damage as well, which is pretty good because normally supports have trouble, you know, dealing with like really tanky targets because they can never buy voids or anything, so they're kind of reliant on Liandry to deal with them. But now Liandry has no mana on it, so it can be a bit harder to buy as well. But I expect this to be bought on, you know, your Zyras, your Luxes, Zera's, stuff like that. And yeah, it should be a pretty solid option there. Next one, Solstice Sleigh. So this is slowing or immobilizing the enemy champ restores health and grants movement speed for 4 seconds to you and a nearby ally with lowest health. So this is another tank support option. To be honest, I'm not too sure like which champs are going to prefer this one and which are going to prefer this one. I guess it depends, like if you feel like you can survive, you know, the initial engage without this and, you know, instead play a bit greedier and give movement speed to your ally, because like obviously this one is pretty selfish. Like it really just, well, I guess the slow is useful, but for the most part it's playing for you, right? Whereas this one I think is, you know, I could see it maybe on a champ like Rakan that is like not as worried about, you know, immediately going in and dying because you have CC that keeps you alive instead of like health that keeps you alive. So maybe that's, you know, go on those sorts of champs. You probably have to ask the support main to be super specific about it, but that's my guess on it. And the last one here, Bloodsong. So it gives you a spellbait effect, which is like having Triforce, like having Sheen. After using your ability, your next attack is enhanced with an additional 71 physical damage. If the champ is a target on hit, apply exposed weakness, increasing the damage they take by 12 or 8%, depending on if you're ranged or melee. So I could definitely see this being built on a champ like Pyke. Maybe a champ like Pantheon support as well. I'm not sure what other champs will build it, but it could be a pretty strong item, I think. I think, you know, just like flat damage increase is pretty good, especially because it's not just for you, right? It's not just your damage is increased, it's like your allies as well, which feels really, really good for bot lane 2v2. Another thing I want to quickly mention about the support items is I think there is potential just because they're cheap enough that you could actually maybe build this in other roles. So something I was thinking, for example, is like, let's say you play something like Karma mid, because you have multiple ways of getting this gold, like both Spell Thief and Relic, it's possible that you just buy a support item like later in the game, like maybe you buy it after like one item, and then you can start relicking to your teammates, and then you get a really effective item later in the game. So that's something I haven't experimented with, but it's just a thought, and if that, like, it has happened a few times in the past, the support items have become purchasable, you know, for other roles, and they tend to be extremely broken when they are. So it's definitely something to look out for, but yeah, I haven't seen it yet personally. And for actual support completed items, I did talk about Trailblazer in the tank section already, but I'll just mention it again. So this is probably for tank supports, you know, stuff like Leona, Blitzcrank, Nautilus. You can go back to the tank section if you want more detailed info on it, but I think it's a pretty good first item, or can even be bought later in the game once you're tankier as well, just to help you get better engages. So that's really strong. And our very last item here is Dawncore. So this is meant to be an enchanter option where it gives AP, ability haste, mana regen, and First Light grants 3% healing and shield power and 5 ability power per 100% base mana regen. So it kind of strikes me as an item that, because of that, is probably meant to be bought a bit later in the build. I could kind of see it being built third item a lot of the time, especially because it is more expensive. At the same time, like, you probably could still buy it first. It's not like you don't have a lot of base mana regen as a support anyway. Maybe getting 2,700 gold together is hard, but yeah, I don't know. It kind of seems like a spike item in the same way that like IE or Rabadons are for other classes. And I think it is nice to have an extra item as an enchanter support, because sometimes you kind of get stuck. You know, you might buy something like, before you would buy like your mythic, you know, something like a Moonstone, then you would buy Ardent, and then it's like, well, if Staff's not that good and you don't want Redemption, like what do you really buy? You had options like Mikhail's. But I think now Dawncore gives you like a third item for enchanters that is still pretty good. And I have seen some people rush this, so you know, going like upgraded support item into Dawncore, I think that has potential. But yeah, I mean, overall it's just going to be an item that you look for on a lot of different enchanters. So I think that's pretty much going to be it for this video. I did cover, I think, all the new items. If there's something I missed, obviously, please put it in the comments section below. I will have a couple more item videos coming out. So I'm going to have one video just talking about what I think the best builds are for every champion in the game. I'm going to try to go through all of them. And then I will also do an item tier list sometime after that, just talking about which items I think are kind of objectively the strongest across the board. But yep, that's going to be it for this video. If you did like it, go ahead and like and subscribe in the next one.